It takes a second to load.
Says we are being live streamed now.
It says live stream, yes.
So we're all set?
It should be going. We link it to our YouTube. For some reason, the YouTube page just came up, and it was playing music. My apologies. We're all set. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, I'm going to call the Planning and Programming Committee meeting to order for April 8th. We have had some changes in composition. Our chair has made some changes, so we want to make sure we take attendance here and note who we have on. Do you all want to call that, or should we just go through the names here? I can just call it here. So we have Mary Hines. Hello, Mary.
Hello, Justin.
We have Mayor Olam and myself. And so that's it. And we're expecting board member DeFerrante and Mayor Davis Younger was not able to make it today. So we do have the summary notes from the November 21st, 2022 meeting. Oh my God, that feels like a long time ago. Likely because it was. Is there a motion to approve the summary notes from the meeting in November of 2022?
So moved.
There's a motion by member Hines, seconded by, hopefully seconded by Mayor Olam. That works. Okay, I see a waving second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Saying nay. The ayes have it. The meeting summary from November 21st, 2022 was approved. We are now going to go to
Mr. Wilson, I just note that I was not present in the meeting, and I know I can do this as a member of the committee, but I have no idea if those are accurate, except that
I got you. You are not attesting to their accuracy. You are simply attesting to the fact that they exist.
Yes, sir.
That's wonderful. All right, perfect. All right, we're going to now go to the FY 2024 six-year program update. I'm going to turn it over to Sri to lead us through this discussion.
Thank you, Mayor Wilson. We are just figuring out if we are live. It shows on our screen here it's live. But
we are, Shri. I went to the YouTube channel,
okay,
so we are live.
Okay, great. Thank you. So yes, Hannah, if you can go down to the presentation slides. If you can get to the full screen, that would be great.
One second, sorry. The Zoom keeps pulling up on my end with the YouTube, so it's not letting me view two screens at once.
While she is doing that, I can start. So Mayor Wilson has been in this committee for quite some time now. I assume, Ms. Hines, you were also part of PPC in the past, or at least you are familiar with.
Yes, so I'm familiar with the process.
Yes. So we have some members who are new to this process. Monica, I don't know if you have any, you want to start anything, or just let me go through the presentation. Okay. So as you all know, NVTA has two primary responsibilities. We have to prepare the long-range transportation plan for Northern Virginia, which we have what we call transaction, which is updated every 5 years. And then based on that plan, we do the funding programs, which is updated every 2 years. The last program was adopted in July of 2022. Subsequently, in December 2022, the authority adopted an update to the transaction. So this program is based on the new plan and the new set of projects we have in that plan. Right now, before I go into the details, I want to mention that today you are not taking any decision on funding. This is just presenting you What we have done so far in this process, we have come through all the analysis. We are presenting you the results. This is already out at the last authority meeting. You all authorized us to go out and start the public comment period. So it's out for public comment already. And we have started to getting comments on this. By May, if I remember correctly, May 19th is the deadline for public comments. Just before that, at the May 9th authority meeting, or just before the authority meeting, we will have the public hearing too. So only after getting this public inputs into this list of candidate projects and the evaluation results, then only staff will prepare a recommendation, funding recommendation, and then it will go through all these committee structure, the technical advisory committee, planning coordination advisory committee, which is a PCAC, and then it will all come to you at this committee, and then you will make a recommendation to the authority. So all that will happen later in the process. So we'll go to the TAC and PCAC in June, and right after that, we will come to you. We had to still decide a date for you to meet next 2 meetings. So sometime late June, early July is when you will see the recommendations. So today we are just going through the set of applications we received and the evaluation criteria and the results. With that introduction, Hannah, next slide, please. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, thank you. So how do we do the project selection? We receive a number of applications. Obviously, we usually don't have enough funding, enough funds available to allocate to all the, to meet all the requirements. So we had to go through a selection process. Primarily, there are 4 components. Eligibility, I already mentioned that transaction is a basis. We have a project list in transaction, so the application has to be directly linked to one or more of those applications. So it could be a project in the project list as it is, or a subset of it, or a combination of multiple multiple projects in transaction. It has to be in Northern Virginia, physically located in Northern Virginia. And we also need a governing body resolution in support of these applications. This is to ensure that the applications we receive from jurisdiction staff has gone through that process of meeting their governing body and getting the approval. Once we receive all those applications, we review that and start doing a set of analysis, what we call quantitative and qualitative considerations. In quantitative analysis, there are 3 of them. One is congestion reduction relative to cost, or CRRC ratio. This is legally required. We are NVTA is expected to give primarily consider CRRC, but it doesn't mean that that's the only thing we have to consider. We can look at other measures too. How we do the CRRC, we look at the project, evaluate that to understand how much congestion reduction this project can potentially bring in from the date it completes until 2045. So a long-term look at how much congestion reduction can be achieved by doing this project. Divide that with the total project cost. That gives us that benefit cost ratio. A second set of qualitative analysis we do is to find the transaction project ratings, which looks at 10 different measures. It includes congestion on auto, congestion on transit, accessibility, especially accessibility to equity emphasis areas. We look at safety, we look at emissions or emission reduction. We look at how this project can improve bike and pedestrian environment in the surrounding areas and so on. So that's we look at all these different measures and come up with one score for combining all those. You means the authority and the committees in the past had gone through that exercise to decide which measure should get how much weight, and so we calculate one weighted score, which we call the transaction rating. That's the second set of analysis. Third set is called long-term benefit. again, legally, there is a requirement that in the long term, the share of transportation benefits from the regional revenue investments each jurisdiction is getting should be approximately equal to the share of revenues jurisdictions bring to the table. So that's what we call long-term benefit. I'll come to all those in detail a little bit later, but these are the primarily 3 qualitative measures we look at. Then we have a series of qualitative considerations, how the past performance, how jurisdictions have been doing in moving the project, spending the money where we already funded projects. If there is any previous NVTA allocation in this specific application, are there any funding gaps? How much external funds are you already bringing? So to understand leveraging different funding sources. We also, this time for the first time, we are looking at alignment with core values. As part of transaction, the authority adopted 3 core values: equity, safety, and sustainability. This is the first time we are looking at it after this 6-year program after that adoption. So we are looking at this as a, if you want to call testing this time. We gave the jurisdiction, the applicants, an opportunity to submit a statement that tells us how this project, each of these projects aligned with the 3 core values. It was not mandatory this time. We received from some jurisdictions, we didn't receive from all. In those cases where we didn't receive, we looked at the application to understand how much of an alignment will be there. Again, we are keeping it at a qualitative consideration because it's none of these qualitative considerations are coming from any model-based or any that statistical kind of analysis. Finally, geographic and model balance, which we don't look at this point, but when the staff start putting together the recommendation, we would like to take a look at, make sure there is geographic and model balance to the program. Finally, as I mentioned, we are in the middle of public comments now, which is a major part of this program. So once we receive the comments, we put together and see which projects are receiving support, which projects are, if there are any opposition and other kinds of comments, we will put together a report and submit to you. And we base our recommendation on all these criteria. Next slide, please. Before I go into any of this, if you have any question, I will pause here and let you ask the questions.
Any questions from anyone at this point?
Justin, just a logistical thing. These charts are really hard to look at on the screen. Might we have copies on Thursday when we come to the regular authority meeting?
I don't know. This is really clear, Mary. Were you staring too close at the eclipse or something? I don't know. This seems really clear.
Even on my big computer, it's
No,
I'm struggling. It's my old eyes.
No. We could get you. Do we have the big printouts available that we can do?
We can make it available when you all come to the authority meeting next week.
Yeah, I just so we have that baseline data, because that's really what this is. And then there's lots of conversation to come, I know. And I know the links to the projects are here. So if I want to learn more, I can come in and click on something. But it's just really hard to track on the computer.
Absolutely, we can provide that.
Thanks.
Yeah. So getting into the meat of this presentation, we received 24 applications from 10 different entities, 9 jurisdictions, 4 counties, 5 cities, and VRE. So that's a set of applicants we have this time. This chart actually shows how much funding request is there from each for each application, if any of them got previous NVTA funds. Are there other committed funds that these projects already have? What's the total project cost? What are the different phases for which these applications are submitted? And then you'll also see the primary and secondary modes for each of these applications. Next slide, please. This is a summary of all those 24 applications. As I mentioned, there are 10 applicants, 24 applications. The request is close to 1 billion. if the past is any pointer, we usually have about 500 to 600 million to program. So you can see that we are well above available funds, potentially available funds. So that's why we had to go through this analysis and decide which projects to be funded. The second table here shows the same 24 applications by mode. There is a good mix of different modes: roads, interchange, commuter rail, bus, bike and pedestrian projects, technology projects, a good mix of all of them. Next slide, please.
Pardon me, Sri,
Yes.
at the bottom of that slide, it says there are 5 continuation projects. Are those marked in any way on the list of
Yeah, so
projects?
in the first table, Hannah, go back one more slide. In here, if you look at, there is a column after the funding request that says previous NVTA funds.
Okay,
So those are the, you'll see an entry there, and those are the 5 projects that already received funding in the previous.
okay, great. Thank you.
This is a map that shows where the project is approximately located in the region, and you can see they are from all over the region. It's not skewed towards one or other part of the region. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that the first thing we look at is CRRC rating. Again, by law, we are supposed to give preference to CRRC rating. So this table, the first table you saw is based on jurisdiction in alphabetical order. Here you are seeing those projects, 24 candidate projects, in the order of CRRC rating. So top project is ranked 1, last project at the bottom is ranked 24 in this measure. Usually we see technology projects come to the top. They usually get reasonably good congestion reduction with a very small cost. So those projects usually get to the top. In the past, we have seen that. And it's the same here also. The 3 projects that we have technology as primary mode, they are all at the top. Further down, it's usually a mix of projects depending on the cost and the impact of the project. You usually see the transit projects and some of the road improvement projects come in the middle. In this particular measure, you may see some of the pure bike pedestrian projects. They come usually towards the bottom half. That's primarily because it's may not be making congestion reduction as much as some of the transit or road projects or the technology projects, and it's not cheap usually. So the ratio is usually at the bottom or second half of the list, and that's the same pattern we see. Same pattern we usually see in other programs, and we see the same thing here. Next slide, please. Second set is transaction rating. Here you can see each of the column in color. Those are the 10 performance measures. Person hours of delay reduction or the congestion reduction in auto, congestion reduction in transit, congestion duration, growth in personal miles traveled in a dedicated right of way, which essentially says if you have bus rapid transit project with a dedicated lane or rail projects, which obviously has a dedicated lane on its own, those kind of projects, and how each of these projects might impact travel in those locations. The rest of the things I already mentioned, many of them: accessibility, bike pedestrian environment, safety, emission reduction, and so on. The second last column, in green, that says transaction rating. That's when we put together that measures in the gray row there from the top, second from the top, you see all the weights. So we put together that weights and find a single rating. That's what you see at the right side. Again, this list is sorted by that transaction rating. The topmost project gets a maximum rating, bottommost project has the least rating. Usually again in this measure, we see some of the larger projects gets a higher rating because obviously they have impact on multiple aspects, multiple measures, so they usually get higher rating.
Sri, this is the first time we've used this array of percentages and factors, right? This is
Yes. In the previous cycle we had hold on. No, this is the second time we are using. While
it's the second?
While we were preparing transaction, we already came up with this weights before we considered the last round of 6-year program. So we
Gotcha.
used it once before. This is the second time we're using.
Do you have any observations about how this works?
Yes, as I said, some of the larger projects, for example, in this round, we don't have some of the biggest, really mega projects like Richmond Highway BRT or Route 1 widening or Fairfax County Parkway widening, Route 28 improvements. So those projects are usually, they impact the region in a much bigger way, in a larger way, and they impact on all these multiple measures you see here. So they usually get a larger score in this rating. In this round, we don't have those sort of mega projects. So even then, you see Seven Corners Ring Road projects that is at the top here. We looked at that because this project had been evaluated in some of the past rounds too. And it was not the top rated because we had other mega projects there. But this time, when we look at it, that's the top ranked project. So we wanted to make sure we understand it correctly. That project, the Ring Road project, is one of the phases. This creates a bypass for Route 7 and Route 50.
Right.
So there is a lot of movement between those two, especially Route 50 coming east and going down on Route 7 and the opposite direction. Those travels now have a better path, a smoother path without going through the complicated Seven Corners intersection. So that makes it a lot more attractive, and that makes it you can see that almost all those measures have a good impact for this project.
But to Mary's question, I think what you're saying is that the efficacy or your judgment of the efficacy of the rubric we came up with has a lot to do with the competition. In this case,
it is working. Yes, it is working as we expected. Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Long-term benefit. I wanted to again stress that it takes several cycles. If there is any mismatch, it takes several cycles to get through and make that adjustment. So we don't expect any major change over immediately in one cycle to other cycle. That's exactly what we want to show here. This chart is from the previous cycle, fiscal year 2022 to 2027 6-year program. I'll just quickly explain. The red square is the revenue share, the share of revenue that each jurisdiction brought to the table. Then there are two other dots there. One is a blue triangle, and the other is orange diamond. Those two are the transportation benefits. We are looking at it in two different ways. One is where the impacts are, where the congestion reduction is happening in the network, and then add all that within a jurisdiction. So how much each jurisdiction is getting the congestion reduction benefit from investment of all the projects so far. The other way to look at it is who is getting the benefits. So if a traveler from Loudoun County is going through Loudoun County, Prince William County, Arlington to DC, the projects that NVTA implemented or funded in Loudoun, Fairfax County, and Arlington County will have some impact on that person's travel. So the benefits is not only for Arlington or Alexandria, but or Fairfax. The benefit is going to Loudoun too. So we look at the origin of all these trips and assign the benefits to that origin jurisdiction. So that's the second way we look at it. So we get a range. There is no one way to do this. So we looked at two different ways we can calculate this and get a range, and that's what we are seeing here. So I will first make you look at Fairfax County. That's the second vertical column. Loudoun, the next one, and then skip Prince William to Alexandria or City of Fairfax, all the cities there, where these dots are pretty close to each other. They may not be overlapping, but they are pretty close to each other. In this case, what we are saying is that their share of benefits is approximately equal to the share of revenue. If you look at Arlington and to a lesser extent Alexandria, there is a gap. And especially the share of revenue is more than the share of benefits, which means you brought more money, but you didn't get enough benefits or approximately equal benefit you haven't received. On the other end is Prince William, where you'll see the benefits are more than the revenue. So essentially, we are saying that Prince William County has received more benefits than the revenue share they brought in. So this is what we saw in the last round. So we did the same analysis this round. So next slide, please. If you look at those counties, you will see that it hasn't changed much. It's more or less the same way. Arlington, Alexandria, there is a gap. Prince William has a gap, but the opposite direction. So as we said, these will take multiple cycles, and it depends on the kind of projects we receive, how well they perform, what are their impacts, and so on. So it will take several cycles for this gap to be filled. Next slide, please. Of course, you cannot read this, and I'm not expecting you to read this, but you will see, Ms. Hines, when I'm sure you have seen this kind of presentation before, where we put all this information together. The first left half of this table is summary, and then the rightmost part where you see the numbers, those are the quantitative criteria, the condition reduction related to cost, transaction rating, and so on. And then all the color-coded part of it, that's what the qualitative considerations. As you know, that's not qualitative consideration. They're not coming from a model-based analysis. We look at the different parts of that particular criteria and come up with 3 or 5 ranges. The criteria details are given at the bottom. Obviously, when we get to that, you can read it later. But that's how we color code it and say. In general, green means the project is doing good or it's supportive of the project. Light green goes down, yellow goes further down, and then the dark brown means project is not doing good in that, or jurisdiction is not doing good in that particular criteria. You'll also see that the long-term benefit is color-coded. That's the last color-coded column there. That's basically, as I explained earlier, either there are 3 options, right? Your share is approximately equal, or your share is more than the revenue share, or your share of benefit is less than the revenue share. So that's what those 3 color code there: green, yellow, and brown. The 3 columns left to that's the 3 core values: equity, safety, and sustainability, how each project is aligned with those. You can see a lot of projects have good alignment. Others have some alignment, may not be the best, but some alignment. Again, it's a comparative scoring there. Next slide, please. Oh, I actually zoomed into just that area, but already explained. So you'll see the details there. Next slide, please.
Shri, can I just ask a question about equity?
Sure.
Can every locality show green in equity? If you have no equity emphasis area or one that's very tiny, I'm just thinking about the cities.
Yeah.
Is yellow kind of the best they can do?
It's not just the equity emphasis area. That is one of the measures we look at when we do that analysis. So it could also means whether you are providing, for example, a transit connection. It doesn't have to be within the city, the connection might be going out to another area that might help connectivity to equity emphasis areas. And then we also look at other factors such as bus stops or I'm not getting the word here, but not just the equity emphasis area. So if you are looking at city has, say, a small city of Fairfax has one location that is equity emphasis area, and that's it. So it still can get green, a higher score. Yes.
It might be useful for us to see what the kinds of things are that you're looking for under each of those three values. Just, I think for our edification, I think this equity conversation is going to continue.
Yes.
And it might be helpful for the authority members to have a clearer sense of what, and have a discussion about, are we comfortable with that's how we're measuring, those are the things we're looking for. Justin, I don't know if you agree with me, but.
No, I agree completely. I think having a few examples of how you guys walked to that assessment, I think might be really, really useful. Just first of all, just for me to be able to better understand how you're doing it. But then I think to be really transparent to jurisdictions on how they achieve or don't achieve.
So when we started this process, we shared a document with the jurisdictions to exactly do that. This is how we are going to look at this, and this is how we will come up with some ratings based on these. And we gave examples too. So
can you get us a copy of what you shared?
We can provide that. Yes.
And then I think in addition to go back and kind of look at, maybe taking a couple projects just for our benefit to say, okay, this is what we said we were going to do, and this is how we did it in these particular projects. Because I would just like to be able to understand and explain it.
Of course, we can do that.
We're having the same struggle on our side with, we just went through our first budget process where we had, kind of equity scores on all budget items, and we've been trying to infuse that into our thinking around how we do amendments to our budget and our budget process. And I think everybody's trying to kind of hang the equity hat on everything and say, oh, well, this one, and I think it's if you don't have a real rigorous process, you make it meaningless. And so I think we're trying to keep ourselves honest on that on our side.
Yeah, I think that's true across the region, honestly, and it's been the struggle at CTB as well. Is how do you think about this? We're looking at measures we never used to look at, like school level free and reduced lunch data. How are you connecting school districts? So it's I think we're in an emerging field, and I think the more you guys really talk about it, you who are still in elected leadership, I think NVTA can kind of like show the way a little bit, because you've got people from all sizes of jurisdictions looking at this. So
no, that's one of the reasons why this is the first time we are doing it. So we are also, everything is new for us too. So we are also looking at what others are doing, and that's why we didn't want to make it a mandatory evaluation this time. We wanted to give it as a testing this time to make sure.
I think that's very smart, but I also think we're going to want to talk about it.
Yes, we want to get better at this. Sure. Thank you. So after all the evaluations, we have this project description form for each of the applications. It gives you a project title, a brief description about what the project is going to achieve, and the location map, and some details about the project milestone, when it will start, when each phase will start and end, when the project is anticipated to be completed, and the project funding, not only the NVTA request, but if they have other funding, then we want to see that too, so that those details are given here. And at the bottom, the bottom of the form, you can see some of those evaluation results are captured. So everything is in one place if you want to look at each project.
So, Justin, if I'm talking too much, you tell me to be quiet.
No, not at all. Go for it.
So one of the things that I started to think about as I was looking at some of this project list stuff was do we care? Because maybe we don't. But might it be informative to us to know, and I'm just making this up, this is the third major road in Falls Church that's having this added. Or we already came through on this road and we added sidewalks and other kind of infrastructure that where there was transportation money involved, whether it's revenue sharing or NVTA's money or a TAP project or smart scale. Does that matter to the authority? As I mean, this is my other high horse of like, we're sitting on all this money. If we've already put money on a corridor for one thing and obviously, and they're coming back for the next thing, is there any way to say to goose project delivery in some manner to get things moving? So, and I'll just give you an example we're dealing with at the state level, which is Eldon Street in Herndon. Sheila knows this well, where the Smart Scale project hit a real snag because of underground rock, and the price tag went crazy. And at the same time, I was looking at TAP projects that intersected with this, and it's like, how can we marry this up and get the best deal we can, recognizing that nobody can afford the underground utility thing because the cost is just too expensive with the rocks. So it's just I've bumped up against this a couple of times recently. And given the number of projects that we have money on, given that we're dealing with the same number of jurisdictions, do we want to know less about performance and more about planned investment based on what's been submitted in the past plus what's come in for this round?
No, that's a great, yes, in a way we look at that. It's not presented in anywhere here. When we develop the recommendations, staff recommendations, we look at some of those things. In the application form, we have a couple of questions that actually look at how this application is synergistic with previously funded application in that jurisdiction or nearby.
Someone rang my doorbell, sorry.
So that's one thing to do. And then we also look at how this application might be synergistic with other applications in the same round or other projects. So we look at that synergy if there is a synergy with previous funded applications or applications in that or projects in that general area. So in a way, we look at that, what Mary Hines was suggesting, but probably we can do in more detail. Next slide, please. All right, that's all I have, and I kind of mentioned the next steps. So at this point, we are presenting all the evaluation results to the committees. This was the last committee where we were doing it. We are in public comment period now, which will end by May 19th. May 9th, I mentioned we will have the public hearing. After the public comment period is over, we will go through the comments, prepare a report on that, and then based on these evaluation results that I just showed you and the public comments, staff will develop a recommendation and will release it first to the committees, TAC, PCAC, and then when we come to PPC, this committee, we will have staff recommendation, TAC recommendation, PCAC recommendation, all of them. So then you will have all that information with you to prepare a recommendation to the authority. And that authority action is expected in July, at the July 11th meeting.
Great, thank you, Sri, for that update. Are there any additional questions? And I guess back to Sri and Monica, is there anything you are looking for out of us besides just awareness at this point?
No, Right now, it's just awareness, and we wanted to give a review. These materials were included in the packet at the March meeting, but admittedly, we should probably print out on a larger spreadsheet because I need my readers in looking at it as well. So we will have that and send that out to you. But right now, we wanted to give you an update on where we are. And in talking to Abigail last Friday, because we are in our public comment process period, I should note, as of last Friday, and it was early evening, we had already received 42 comments. So comments are coming in. I haven't checked regarding who has signed up to give public testimony in person or virtually just yet, but we are receiving comments.
Great. All right. Any additional questions from anyone else?
Thank you.
All right. Let's move now to preliminary deployment plan for the regional BRT system. And this one is going to Keith.
Members of the committee, I'm just going to give you a brief update on where we are as authority members. I suspect you've already picked up on quite a bit of this information, so apologies in advance if I'm duplicating. So I'll go through fairly quickly and be happy to come back and answer questions if you would like more detail. If we could go to the next slide, please. Just a reminder, we always like to reinforce NVTA's two primary responsibilities are a long-range transportation plan transaction and the 6-year program about which you've just heard where we are for the current cycle. When it comes to the preliminary deployment plan for bus rapid transit, or PDP BRT, until we can find a better name than that. If you look at this central graphic here, you see the top half is the long range plan, the lower half is the funding program, and kind of starting from the upper left hand side, just around the 10 o'clock kind of position. Transaction goes through a process of identifying current and future needs, analyzing regional impacts, and ultimately developing a plan and associated project list. And then we move into the funding program in about the 4 o'clock position. And that kicks off, Shree's just explained the call for projects. We evaluate the candidate projects. You've just heard a summary of that evaluation, and then eventually come the July authority meeting, hopefully you'll be adopting the 6-year program where we'll be selecting and funding projects. So as you look at that circle of life, when it comes to NVTA, you don't see a BRT PDP anywhere on there. And the reason is if it were to be on there, it would be kind of like in the 3 o'clock position between the long range plan being adopted and the call for projects for 6-year program started. And so it's really the PDP, the preliminary deployment plan, is looking to take output from transaction. And there were several pages on this in transaction, you may remember, when it was adopted in December of 2022, which talked about a regional BRT system as being one new way to consider new transportation choices that could potentially help Northern Virginians to reduce their dependency on driving, especially on driving alone. So it fits very well. It's not to say we think BRT is the answer to everything, right? By no means would it be. But equally, we do think a regional approach to BRT was something that was worth a deeper look. In part because no one else was doing that, and also in part because NVTA is already funding $500 million of BRT projects, which for the most part are being developed independently of one another. And we wanted to be sure that as more and more BRT lines are funded by NVTA, that not only do the lines perform well in their own right, but when they all connect to each other, there's some synergistic benefit there as well, or at least they're planned in a way much like, you know, rail systems are planned, so interconnect seamlessly. And we wanted any future BRT network in Northern Virginia to be equally seamless for Northern Virginians to use. So that's kind of where it fits in the overall scheme of things for NVTA's primary responsibilities. Hannah, if you could go to the next slide, just to kind of refresh here, as I mentioned, BRT was covered in transaction and in previous cycles of the 6-year program, with $500 million allocated to 5 BRT lines to date. There are 5 BRT lines either in operation or in development in Northern Virginia, and the authority has money on all of them. In transaction, there are approximately 100 projects, I think it is, with an associated cost of $10 billion for BRT or other high capacity transit lines. Obviously, as you know, it will take many cycles of the 6-year program before the authority has $10 billion. So we think it's really important that the approach to BRT looks at, you know, where the authority is going to get the biggest bang for its buck, and we want to make sure that we aren't investing in BRT lines which don't connect with one another, that possibly even preclude an adjacent BRT line from reaching its full potential. So taking this overarching look is what we're doing here. The little graphic to the right shows in blue the lines. It's going to probably be hard to read, but it basically shows the layout of the BRT lines that are currently in operation or in planning, at least the bits that NVTA has funding on. I think that if you add to the full length of Metroway, there'll be more of a north-south blue line, kind of just to the west of the Potomac River. So as with everything else that you fund, transaction sets the initial eligibility, and our hope is that the PDP, when it's completed, which is targeted to be in 2025, but technically, for the technical analysis work, will be substantially completed by early in 2025, which will coincide, in fact, slightly in advance of the next call for regional transportation projects for your next 6-year program after the one we're currently working on, which will be the first one where the end year is in the 2030s, which makes it seem a long way away, but it really isn't. So that's what we're kind of working towards with this. And obviously, getting money onto these projects, if they're strong projects, we do believe will help the project sponsors to seek other forms of funding so that NVTA's regional revenues can be leveraged by federal, state, and possibly local revenues as well. So, you know, getting things moving early is, we think, overall going to be a very positive strategy for Northern Virginia. Next slide, please, Hannah. So you may have heard me say this before: think big, start small, build momentum. That's kind of where we are. But the think big is the $10 billion in transaction. The start small is not that $500 million is small, but we've started small with 5 lines and $500 million, and then build momentum in a very coordinated and thoughtful way towards that big picture, which potentially, if built out over many cycles of the 6-year program, might look something like the graphic that's shown on the right-hand side here. The PDP itself is going to include a lot of public engagement. That's already underway. A detailed analysis of ridership and congestion reduction impacts, because obviously, as you've already heard, NVTA has a focus on congestion reduction impacts. So it's important for us to invest in BRT lines that will have some impact on getting some people, at least, to change their mode of travel. Operations, capital, and operating costs will need to be estimated. We'll need to look at funding opportunities over and above NVTA. Certainly, there's going to be some governance considerations, but we do believe that a regional BRT system will be fully aligned with all three of NVTA's core values of equity, safety, and sustainability. Next slide, please. Just quickly, the schedule. We are in phase one, data gathering, which is also where, and part of that data we're gathering is public engagement related, and part of it is technical, looking at peer regions across the country to see what sort of circumstances have led to successful BRT lines around the country. As we move into phase two, we'll be taking all those results into a more detailed analysis, at which point we will begin to develop a more detailed set of lines, corridors than what was included in transaction, but that is our starting point. We'll come back in phase three with some more public engagement where people will have the opportunity to kind of react to what is being proposed in a little more detail. At the moment, I think people are finding it's a little bit too theoretical. As you may recall, at the February authority meeting, we presented the results of our perception survey, which was part of this schedule here, where we asked some BRT questions. And you may recall very low familiarity with the concept of BRT, but very high positivity towards the potential benefits of BRT. We think by the time we get to phase three, we'll be moving a little bit more into the specific and away from the generic. And then we'll be reporting out in the second half of 2025 on all of the findings. But that's the overarching process. Within this schedule, not explicitly shown here, we do plan to hold a couple of work sessions with authority members so that you'll have an opportunity to provide an input, somewhere between the transition point between phase one and phase two, and then again between phase or during phase three. So it's very important. We feel that if anything is going to get deployed, it has to have the sign off from all of our member jurisdictions and agency partners in order for this to kind of move from a preliminary development to an actual design and implementation. I think there may be one more slide. Yeah, just while we're in phase one, I'm not going to spend much time on here, but I do want to kind of draw your attention to the bottom line, the bottom row here, where we talk about in the red boxes, the perception survey, the focus groups, and the online questionnaire. The perception survey we reported out in February. There was quite a good discussion and conversation at the end of that presentation. You may recall on crime, and because crime had become a fairly important quality of life factor in the last iteration of the perception survey. The focus groups are now complete as well. We took the opportunity to ask the focus group participants their feelings on crime as well. And in the next month or two, we will report back to the authority on the findings of the focus groups. But the focus groups and the perception survey and other work we've been doing will help feed into an online questionnaire, which will be taking place later this spring, or potentially we may wait until the fall to do the online questionnaire. We're not quite sure what the optimal timing of that's going to be. So that basically is where we are. And you'll see kind of on the right-hand side, task 1.6 is NVTA work session. That's the first work session that we'll be holding with you, and that is at the kind of transition point from phase one to phase two. Hannah, I believe that's my last slide. Yes, it is. So happy to take any questions if there are any.
I do, Mr. Chair, I do have a quick one.
Yep, go for it, man.
So maybe you can remind me how we, Keith, how we coordinate with um, all the localities as well as the regional, NVTC, the other regionals that are working in the BRT space? I know there's a mechanism, but I could not share with you what that is or how that works.
Sure. Yeah, no, thank you for the question. Board Member DeFranci, we actually during the last update of transaction, so this is probably going back 4 years or so now, we recognized that if we were to be looking for anything related to modes that kind of exist within the region, but don't really have a kind of a central forum for discussion, that we would need to create one. And that is what we did during transaction. We created what we called at the time a BRT planning working group. And that working group membership includes all the localities, includes all the regional agencies, and it doesn't stop at the Potomac. We do have participation from Montgomery County, from Prince George's County, the District of Columbia, and obviously WMATA is involved, as they would be anyway. But so that is what we created for transaction. We've continued that working group going forward now as we're moving into the preliminary deployment plan, and that is our central coordination point for our work. But we are aware of some specific initiatives that are very important to this work. And as things have worked out, we always anticipated this would be the case, that there's some other initiatives, say, that are being done by Metro Bus and by NVTC, which have an overlapping kind of scope relevance to the work we're doing. And so as those initiatives report out, we will take the opportunity to use their outputs as our inputs.
Great.
Through our own RJAC, the Regional Jurisdiction and Agency Coordinating Committee, which has been in existence for many years, we're in regular contact anyway on a monthly basis. But the BRT planning working group was set up for transactions specifically to talk about BRT initiatives, and has continued into the preliminary deployment plan.
Great. And that would be, and just, I know it's close to six other, I'm the rookie. So I'll just say, is that Sarah Crawford, or is that Rich, or is that, from the Arlington staff, who would be lead, or is it Kirk, or I can loop back, but I don't know if there's a particular staff that tends to take point on that from the Arlington team.
For RJAC, Rich Roisman, he's actually co-chair of RJAC. For the BRT planning working group, it tends to be Dan Maloff and actually several other people representing other parts of Arlington counties.
Great. I knew Rich was co-chair of the broader group, but Dan, and it's just helpful to know on BRT, and appreciate your indulging me with the question, both you and then all the others on the call. Thank you.
Justin, can I
please,
quick, so I have lived through GRTC basically redoing all their bus lines in the Richmond area, and then the whole build out and all of that has all happened in the last 8 years. Jen DeBrule, who's leaving at the end of May from DRPT, was really, really involved in that whole process of GRTC kind of stepping in and doing the work they needed to do to better serve their region. I just wonder if there's any lessons learned she might share with us, or cautions as this planning work continues from her vantage point before she disappears. I know that she's planning to do some really fun things all summer and not be around. So it might just be worth it, Monica, even if you just sat down and picked her brain a little bit. And then the other person who was really involved in the layout of the routes and the bus reorganization was Nick Donahue. Had his up to his elbows, I think, in the pot. But again, I think, they've been through this recently. They've dealt with multiple, it's not quite as complex as we are with Metro, but I think that they could give us some, as I said, lessons learned or cautionary tales that might be worth having in your hip pocket.
Yes,
So.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, a good suggestion. A part of the phase one work, I didn't touch on it very much, was where we are doing a peer review, and certainly GRTC has come up on that. But specifically, as you mentioned, there's possibly some personal institutional knowledge there, which is about to go away or become less available, and it would certainly make sense to kind of make sure that we don't lose that knowledge. So yeah, that's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Other thoughts? Let me just say, I'm obviously very excited to see this move forward, and I think this has great potential. I have kind of three thoughts in a way. So I want to be careful in the kind of language that we use, and we don't suggest that the only way BRT is effective is if it's kind of interconnected in a network or a system, because I think we use some language on some of those slides that seems to suggest that, and that's I think BRT needs to connect to something, but the fact that it connects or doesn't connect to another BRT line is not necessarily a definition of success or even a definition of failure. And I mean, obviously we have the region's first BRT system here in connecting with our friends in Arlington, and that has connections to other modes, and I think that's what's made it successful, as well as the corridor was well thought through, and we still have a long way to go, as you saw in funding requests for other projects. As it relates to that. So I just want to be careful about that language. While there is great benefit in a network and having it connect to other BRT lines, that's not necessarily a definition of success on its own. And then I think the big test of whether this is a good use of our energies is going to be whether we, I think, whether we prompt two things. So one, whether we prompt people to think about BRT and their planning when they otherwise weren't. And I think kind of the codicil of that is potential substitution effect, where folks who were planning something else perhaps decide that perhaps BRT is a better investment, and why it is a better investment. So I want to make sure we're continuing to guide this effort by that idea that just doing a report on the BRTs that are planned is not going to be a good success, and just trying to figure out how we connect lines that are going to be already planned is not going to be a success. But if we can get everyone around the region thinking about how important this could be and how this could be really successful, I think that would really, really be a success, and we'd really get somewhere. And it could be that in the sum of that is a disconnected line, a line that is not connected with any of these other ones. And I just want to make sure we don't close the door to some of those ideas. So.
Listen, your comment prompted me on one other thing that I've been thinking about for quite some time. Our region is pretty built out, and I think Metroway is a good example of, where sometimes things run in mixed traffic and sometimes they have dedicated lanes. And in order to be respectful, I think, of our historic towns and cities, we're going to have to not be a perfect always in a dedicated lane, situation here. And I think the more that we think strategically about that, so that we're not, so that we're respectful of the environments that already exist while also trying to figure out, what's the sweet spot for when we switch from a lane that's mixed to a lane that's dedicated, where we don't have to expand the roadway to, the Fairfax example of out at Gum Springs, where the road got 11 lanes wide until people said, wait, how will we ever cross that? So I really want our region to think of this as an opportunity to show how BRT in a developed historic place can work, and how it can move people more efficiently than any of the other choices that we might have available to us right now that we could afford. So that's just the state is giving us fits about funding in running calling it BRT in mixed traffic. And they think it has to always have a dedicated lane. And I've been talking about this for more than a year. Down there and up here, we just have to make sure that that is not the state's definition.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think, we have one BRT line running and two more coming. And if we had to be completely in dedicated right away, not one of them would have happened.
That's exactly right.
There's just no way. And so, I think we have on the two that we have not built yet. We have visions to do an incremental approach and start off with what we can get right now. And then as we can get additional right away, certainly as development proceeds in some of those areas, absolutely, we grab that right away and expand it. And I think in the one that we already built, the Metroway, the existing Metroway system, we did that exact approach. We built in dedicated where we could, both in Arlington and Alexandria, and we're now going back and getting funding for expanding that dedicated right away, and we'll continue to do that over time.
But it's hard to justify taking a lane if you have no ridership to show why.
Yep.
And that's why the incremental approach is so important, because you build the people who want to ride it, and then you can justify the shifts. Without it, it's why Columbia Pike was a good candidate for something more, because the ridership was already so big.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't happen, but.
And it also positions you to take advantage of opportunities as they arise too, because and it makes those opportunities much more incremental and easier to swallow, because then it becomes hey, we can grab this right away and we can reduce running time by X amount, which ultimately improves capacity and congestion mitigation. So yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, Mary, completely.
I gotta jump. I'm sorry. I have people downstairs for dinner. Good meeting though.
Absolutely.
See you later.
All right. Anything else on BRT?
That's it from me.
All right. So thank you very much for that presentation and the progress that we're making there. All right, that brings us to Monica with the NVTA update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be quick. As you all are probably aware, the authority, we have moved. We are now located at 2600 Park Tower Drive. That is 2600 Park Tower Drive. That's where Thursday's meeting will be held, on the first floor. We're still in the process of having our permanent space built out, which is on the 6th floor. When we complete that, then your meetings moving forward will be on the 6th floor. But until that time, we are on the first floor for our meeting. So I did want to note that. And lastly, speaking of this Thursday's meeting, we will be asking the authority to adopt the FY 2025 budgets. That means operating, regional revenue, which is the 70%, and then the local distribution, which is the 30%. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that update. Look forward to making our way out. It still seems far away, but we'll figure out a way out there. So Maybe Matt and I could get a stagecoach and share it on the way out. The long,
Right across the street from Dunloring
the
Metro.
long journey out there to the hinterlands.
Stagecoach, I like it.
Stagecoach. We can try to forge some rivers here on the way. All right. Anything else on that? Nope. All right. We are meeting again on the 6th of May. Is that right? At 5 p.m. All right. Unless we have anything else, we will adjourn for today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
great
Thank you
Mr.
very
Chair.
much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.